Medical innovation starts with medical discussion. Talking about the future and what comes next with Project MedTech.
Hello, everybody. I'm Lindsay Deneen, Director of Marketing and Engagement at Project MedTech, and welcome to another episode of the Project MedTech podcast. If we can help you in any way, or you would like to suggest a future guest, you can email us at info@projectmedtech.com. If conversations like this are helpful, that's exactly why we bring people together at our signature events, the Midwest Showcase, the Startup Symposium, and Coming to America. For more on our events that include networking, education, and pitch competitions for startups, check them out at www.projectmedtech.com. We even have sponsorship options if your company is also dedicated to accelerating medical technology to impact patient lives. So reach out today to get involved. The Project MedTech podcast is proudly sponsored by Ward Law. Ward Law Office, LLC is a boutique law firm specializing in the practice of patent and trademark law. They are committed to providing inventors, entrepreneurs, and businesses of all types with personal and professional services and are flexible to meet your unique needs. It is their goal to both educate on how to secure valuable patent and trademark protection and to provide high-quality services at rates affordable to independent inventors, startups, and small businesses alike. Without further ado, let's dive in.
All right, Cory, it's been a long time coming, but finally, welcome to the podcast.
It's great to be here, Duane. We've been trying to plan this for a long time, and our schedules keep changing. So it's good to finally get to do it.
Yeah. So I get to talk to new people on the podcast. I get to talk to people I've known for a little while on the podcast, and sometimes I get to talk to people that we get to do a lot of work together, and that's definitely this one. So. But let's start first before we dive into everything, just an intro into who you are, your background, how you landed in medicine and med tech, and then we'll kind of take it from there.
Yeah. My day job is I'm a pediatric surgeon at Nationwide Children's, which I trained for a while to get here in my third year of practice as faculty. It usually takes 9 to 10 years to be a pediatric surgeon after medical school. So I did all that. My clinical focus now is minimally invasive surgery, small incision surgery with thoracic esophageal, ECMO, which is cardiac bypass, as well as critical care. But, pediatric surgeons do pretty much everything. That's my day job. But, I spent 2 years at Michigan, and during my time there, this was in the middle of my general surgery training, which I did in Cleveland. I completed a pediatric device design fellowship where I was introduced to the biodesign process. And that, is familiar to a lot of your listeners, which started me thinking more about how innovation happens and how you can actually go out and intentionally do it. So after I was done with my training, finished my pediatric surgery fellowship at Michigan, I was brought on to Nationwide now 3 years ago to build an innovation center and also put Ohio in the region on the map in the medtech space. And I think we've done a lot since then. But, I would say as a high level, like how I entered the medtech space and why I'm here is, what came clear to me was not necessarily a lack of opportunities. We see new ideas all the time. The challenge was actually having a structured mechanism that finds those opportunities, supports them, executes on them within the hospital system. There's a lot of talking, not a lot of execution. And so that, sort of led me into this area fresh out of, being a faculty. And I've always been drawn to solving complex problems, and pediatric innovation is this unique pediatric med tech and is a unique combination of, clinicians, hospitals, engineers, industry, VC. And so I'm really driven to bring these groups together into, turning sort of chaos into order along a common mission for impact. So that's where I got here.
Yeah. This is cool. So, I mean, one, I applaud you for having to go over the border and do some training at U of M, but you finally landed in the good spot at Ohio State. So that's good. And obviously I'm kidding. We're doing our event in Detroit, Michigan in
Yeah.
May here. So, but regardless, so yeah, so I think, to set the stage too, a little bit with pediatric innovation, and we have listeners all over the world. So in the US, in Ohio, um, there are some very prominent pediatric hospitals. There's Nationwide, where you practice. There's Cincinnati Children's, who's a part of the MPDC, which we're going to get to. Cleveland Clinic Children's Hospital, UH Children's Hospital. I think it's Rainbow's Babies or something like this.
Yep.
And there's a handful of others, but Nationwide and Cincy Children are top 10 institutions in pediatric. And probably on some charts, one or two of them, they might be number one. But I think for people who are maybe just in life sciences, the pediatric device space it has such a need for innovation. For one big reason in my mind is when you think about drug development, it's very easy to scale down the dosage for a smaller population, right? For a child, you just scale it down. For devices, it's not that easy. Now we're talking about if it's a some type of vascular surgery, we're talking about, well, how big is the catheter? If we're talking about an implant, that implant has to grow potentially with a patient that's in literally their peak growth
Yep.
stage
Yep.
of life. And so there's just really unique factors there. And so tell me a little bit about standing up the innovation arm. Because Nationwide is certainly known for its cell and gene therapy.
Yep.
For those who don't know. And then I'd love to hear about this Midwest Pediatric Device Consortium and what that is, because that was the first time we got introduced. It was at Rev 1 in Columbus, and we're talking about the launch of this MPDC. We got to meet each other, and then kind of the rest is history. But kind of lay the groundwork for standing up the innovation arm, and then what MPDC is.
Yeah. Yeah, and to add a little bit to your context, I guess, as
Yeah.
to make the argument, which is like, why is pediatric hard and why is it different? And it's a numbers challenge, it's a scalable challenge, it's a clinical evidence challenge. And just to give sort of some data points, there's 40 to 50 freestanding children's hospitals. There's 5,000 to 6,000 adult hospitals. The other couple hundred children's hospitals may be associated with an adult hospital, but realistically, there's not a lot of, the numbers are very different. And so that's a scale problem. That's a numbers problem. To get the clinical evidence or the data for your submission, for your whatever evidence generation you have to do, is hard to do at a single institution. So it really requires multi-institutional collaboration, which, I can say from experience is a lot of work to do. And then, we can probably have a whole podcast about the challenges of pediatrics. The one you harped on was look, like, sizes change, kids grow, kids are, you can't just make one size fits all, because kids are constantly growing. There's different physiological changes, especially in neonates versus infants versus teenagers. So a lot of variability there. And then, I'll get into the sort of the innovation center at PDC, but from a funding specific or resource specific, we're doing some studies now looking at globally, like, how much money is dedicated to the pediatric space. And the reality is a fraction of VC funding is dedicated to pediatric only companies, less than 1%. Venture-backed pediatric companies are about 1.5% of the total venture-backed companies. So, and kids represent 25% of the population. So there is this, lack of consistency about allocation of resources. And all of these, challenges are the reason why we stood up the Innovation Center in Nationwide Children's, but ultimately why the FDA put forth the Pediatric Device Consortia grants, which were started now over 10 years ago, that have selected hubs across the country with the sole purpose of advancing pediatric device development. So maybe I'll talk about sort of those two entities separately a little bit, but related.
Yeah. Yeah, I like that, and I think Fred more color too on the issues with pediatric innovation. Yeah, let's while you're on it, uh, I think explain both separately,
Yeah.
and then I'd love to hear about with the MPDC, we're very involved in that, but I'd love to hear just like your learning experience too of like what worked, what didn't work. I mean, you've already highlighted on one, which is getting institutions to work together is really hard. And
Yeah.
it's I don't think that's like earth shattering to anybody, but when the main mission of hospitals is, to take care of their patients, right? And then you're talking about innovation, which is kind of like a byproduct of what they're doing. It's a secondary type of mission, and you have two institutions that are huge, and you're trying to get their secondary things to work together. It's
Yep.
a heavy lift, right? It's not for the faint of heart, and I've had a front row seat to watch you try to navigate this. And so yeah, but talk about both independently, and then we'll kind of tie it together.
Yeah. And it is important for context because both of those things are challenges. The Innovation Center, when I was brought on, the MPDC didn't exist yet, Midwest Pediatric Device Consortium. So this was about 3 years ago. And so I spent about 6 months like just meeting with everybody in the space and trying to understand what is out there, what has worked and what hasn't worked. And there were a lot of things that popped up as you think about the Innovation Center as your internal de-risking mechanism that is clinical focused. And so we really stood it up as an educational platform as well as a hospital integrated de-risking platform and sort of the inside out mechanism. And working hand in hand with tech transfer that says, hey, look, we need each other, but ultimately having integration with the hospital side, having clinician involvement, not just doctors, but nurses, respiratory therapists, everybody across the board is important to sort of change culture within the institution. And we built the Innovation Center also, as I said, on education, which we launched an innovation fellowship, which is a full-time innovation 1-year fellowship with biomedical engineers. It's grown from 1 to now 4 to going to be 10 in 2030. We had 120 applicants this year for 4 spots. It's growing rapidly, but the Innovation Center is really the internal mechanism within an NCH that evaluates pipeline, helps fund it and de-risk it and support it in addition to educating future innovation leaders for the fellowship. And so like thinking about that as locally, during those 6 months, I met with everybody and then the PDC came up, which the Pediatric Device Consortium is it's the highest, biggest grant that you can get in the pediatric space, funded by the FDA. It's about a $7 million grant. And so the pieces were already coming together. The ecosystem already existed. We have a bunch of huge children's hospitals and, Ohio State, here in the Midwest. And so we just sort of put together all of these parts into a network and was able to secure that grant and to formalize that partnership. And, there's a lot of lessons learned in that. And, I think as an institutional body that is tied into a lot of institutions, there's like the double-edged sword of being like we need a multi-institutional consortia to solve the problem, but it is a lot of work to keep the function going and make sure that we're all aligning, which I've been super happy about. We've got an amazing group of partners and people at the sites, but it has been, it's been really, really great to work with some of the best PIs and leaders in the field. But creating a multi-institutional consortia has its challenges from a contracting, legal, negotiating, how to distribute the money, and so not to get too far down the challenge path, but that's sort of how the MPDC was born, as a consortia that involves Cincinnati Children's, Nationwide Children's, Ohio State, various areas of Ohio State, CDME, the engineering school, Keenan Center, and then Cleveland Clinic Children's, as well as many others, to essentially come together to support pediatric device companies and software as a medical device across the country, not just the region. We're the hub that supports them and uses the expertise to provide assistance, but really focused on one mission, and that's pediatric device development.
Yeah. Can you talk? Yeah. Can you highlight a little bit more in terms of the companies you're supporting? We've had the privilege to help throw the showcase the last few years. Last year I got to host the webinar series that we did, and I think we just learned so much through that as well. But talk to me a little bit about the fact that the companies, this isn't just oh, we're servicing companies in Ohio or the Midwest. It's all over the place. So walk me through a little bit more about that.
Yeah. So, I think it's very important that we maintain the mission, which is pediatric device development everywhere. And so we are providing local support to obviously the institutions and bringing companies here to do their clinical studies. But in the reality, 90% of the companies that we've met with or funded are outside of the state of Ohio. We've evaluated about 250 projects. We've directly helped around 80 pediatric device companies. These are full-scale startups in the pediatric space. And we've given out about $1.2 million of non-dilutive funding already and secured another, $500,000 already focused on that effort. And so, we 100% support local IP from Ohio and want to support the institutions, but we are also one of the only pre-seed funding gaps that exist in the country that's sole purpose is pediatric device development, where otherwise venture and larger institutions will never support. So we're here to fill that gap.
Yeah. Can you also talk to? So where are the other? PDC or not PDC? Yeah, PDCs. Yeah.
PDCs. Yeah. So there's the Midwest Pediatric Device Consortium. There's APDI, which is Alliance Pediatric Device, which is central in DC, Children's National. Okay. There's the Southwest PDC, which is in Texas Children's, and then has other sites. There's CTIP, which is one of the other PDCs that's focused at Lurie Children's, as well as some ties to California. And then there's the Stanford UCSF PDC, which has Stanford and UCSF. So there's 5 PDCs. Yeah. They utilize regional resources to support everywhere, and they all sort of have unique aspects, but are not geographically bound by the companies they support, right? We have limitations that say, hey, we can only support 25% of the companies out of our home institution. So we are incentivized by the FDA to actually fund startups everywhere.
Yeah. And I think Texas Children's is in Houston. Is that right?
Yeah.
I think, okay. So for people listening in, if you have not been to the Texas Medical Center in Houston, Texas, you need to go down there. It is a sight to see. We're in Cleveland. We think Cleveland Clinic's campus is big. Nationwide is ballooning down in Columbus as well. Every time I go down there, I feel like Cory's like, hey, just kidding. We're in a new building over here now. But the Texas Medical Center is like anything I've ever seen in my entire life. It is a absolutely massive campus full of like, I think it's like 28 or 29 independent hospitals. It's crazy. Okay, so Cory, I want to talk a little bit about lessons learned as you've gone here and standing up either the innovation arm or the MPDC, and it can be both too. And
Yeah.
I'll just say from my perspective, when we first met, this would have been 23. Is that right?
Yep.
Yeah. So Project MedTech was a few years old at that point. We were also in a second year of kind of like full-time work. We're all three of the co-founders. We're all here working full-time. And, for Project MedTech, like it was always like, when we would work with the community, we just wanted like a seat at the table. That was always our thing. We were like, we just feel like we're not there yet where people are like, hey, we should bring Project MedTech into this discussion, right? And now that's different. Like we feel like we've definitely got a good rapport of startups we've worked with, and now we get that seat at the table. And I remember being like, Cory's so lucky because he's at Nationwide, so he's always going to get a seat at the table. He's one of the institutions. And then I watched it play out for 3 years, and that all of a sudden I saw, while that is great, there is difficulty with that as well, because you have to play nice in the sandbox with all the other big institutions, and you have to get them to come along. And I will say, playing nice is easy. It is the pace at which that happens is at like a glacier speed, and it's very hard to move that up. Where at Project MedTech, we are so lucky that we work with startups who have to move at this rapid pace, and we like that. Like that's exciting for us. And I know for a fact that you like working at a rapid pace. And so
Yep.
talk to me a little bit about how you navigate. It's the benefit where, yeah, you have Nationwide behind you. You have Cincinnati Children's, Ohio State, Cleveland Clinic. You've got those institutions behind you with this MPDC, and that, from the outside looking in, it looks like, oh, that's awesome. But there's a speed there. There's also difficulties there. So kind of walk me through some of those lessons learned as you've stood this up.
Yeah. And a lot of it, it's the devil is 100% in the details, meaning that the solution to the pediatric device gap nationally is also the hardest thing to accomplish, which is a true multi-institutional effort that aligns incentives and people towards a mission. And that is, I think that's why we've been really successful so far, but it takes a constant effort to, minimize atrophy, to reach out to institutional, co-investigators. And I would say that some of the reasons why we've been successful at doing that is that, some of my job, as well as my co-I, David Ekman, who's an amazingly accomplished anesthesiologist at OSU, is going to all of the institutions and being like, hey, look, how can I make the PDC align with your goals? I can be flexible. Like being new, we can be flexible and align with what your goals are. If you tell me what those are, we can fund them, we can support them, we can figure out ways to do it. My hope is that, that continues to be a common theme, which is, hey, look, like we're giving our effort, we're giving our time, but there's a quid pro quo involved. Like our 150 advisors that we use to evaluate. My hope is that, hey, look, they're not given free work. They're evaluating our companies, but they also get access to the pipeline and the evaluations and potentially meeting companies that are across the country. And so I think one of the ways that we've been successful, but also the ways that we can't, let off the gas, is that is a constant thing that needs to keep evolving and happening. How do we help you? How do you help us? And so and I'll say this, like there is also this notion that like if the PDC, that the institution that owns the PDC is just has all this money and is benefiting from it. And that's not totally the case, because we can't actually give money to our own technologies. And not to mention, I'll say, just because large institutions are not, it is a different way that you engage with startups as opposed to large institutions working with other large institutions, is that there is a lot of work on the legal contract, instituting money, timelines that we love doing, and the institutions, not doing anything wrong. They're just used to it, but it is something that like is a lot of work. 3 to 4 hours a day, making sure the contracts are going through, and so there is sort of that burden. But our hope is that we continue providing value to the other institutions. But once again, you can't. You can't take your foot off the gas pedal.
Yeah.
Keep focused hard and how to keep maintaining that. And once again, going back, I want to harp on this, is that, what we've been really, really focused on, and what I hope is that, the Innovation Center and the MPDC are two separately funded entities, inside out, sort of outside in. And our purpose is, yes, we are helping bring institutional studies and clinical evidence and helping support that, but also we have a mission to all device companies and device development everywhere that is institutionally agnostic. And that's what we want to make sure we maintain. That also takes a lot of stakeholder management, So anyway.
Yeah. So talk to me a little bit about how you've negated some of the problems we talked about earlier. And I'm like kind of interested in this investment side of things as well. So, when Nationwide has had a number of huge cell and gene therapy products get licensed, spun into companies, and exited. But how do you kind of get over even if the MPDC can fund a company to get through pre-seed and seed, and maybe you have some family offices and angels around there, but how have you been trying to kind of shepherd the herd around the next step of these companies, right? Because I understand that, the most of the companies go, oh, well, the product, the market size is small.
Yep.
But also there's impact funds out there. There's venture funds that are interested in pediatric. There's not a lot. There's got to be family offices and angels around there. But how have you sold some of the ones that are maybe on the fringe, where they're like, I'd consider it, but I got to see an opportunity for a return here? I mean, are those conversations any easier? Are they frustrating? How are you handling them?
Yeah, I would say, our hope with the MPDC is to obviously help garner those conversations, but more importantly, help get the companies to a point that those conversations are easier for them to have.
Yeah.
So, maybe a few sort of examples is like, outside of, we're restricted by the amount of money that we can give, right? The FDA restricts us based on that. And so when we went into this, we said, look, what are the things that we can give to companies that's outside of money? And so one of the things that we really harp on is anybody who comes through the door gets an assessment, evaluation, gets guidance, whatever the core infrastructure is, we give you free advice. You meet with our regulatory team, you can meet with our advisors, you can meet with the clinicians. Like, we want to provide you with that outside of what we can do with the funding. And so that's the first thing. We want to give everybody help. The other thing that we realized is, access to the hospital is a major barrier to pediatric companies and companies everywhere. And so, having ties to large institutions and some of the biggest specialized hospitals in the country our other value generation is they're getting exposed to high volume clinical environments and the advisors within those that can help boost their argument to then go out and get more funding. And the final thing is our hope is that we've really created a platform of intake, evaluation, review, access, and funding that is scalable. That if a larger industry partner or a larger venture fund comes and say, "Hey, look, we want to be involved in these discussions. We want to look at your pipeline. We want to have access to what's going on." We're open to that. That helps us. We're that only helps our metrics. We don't own the IP. We're not owning any of it. We're just helping shepherd that. And so, where we try to offset the lack of money that we can give, we try to provide value to the startups in other areas. Using our help, we're tied to the FDA, getting them in touch with vendors, and then the hospital access.
Yeah. So is I assume these grants come up for renewal every so often and that sort of thing. Is this one of those things where you're trying to build the infrastructure or get it to a point where, hey, what happens if the grant dollars go away? Right. And because that's certainly got to be something that everyone thinks about. Right. One, even if they did renew it, they could move the PDCs around if they want to another institution. Like people could bid on it. But two, especially in this kind of environment where I would say governments are fairly unpredictable. And so, grant money can disappear, go away, kind of at the snap of a finger. Is the idea that you build the infrastructure around this so that, hey, if it does go away, can we sustain this innovation ecosystem? Maybe it looks a little different, but at least the parts of what you've learned so far are still here.
Yeah. That is 100% been our goal since day one. Is we're grateful to the support from the FDA, the grant process, but ultimately, we are laser focused on providing value for sustainability. And that is part of our mission about, hey, look, let's make sure that we're providing a multi-institutional value that's a platform that can be scaled outside of the FDA grant. And we've worked with the state of Ohio and talk about how this can be an economic impact for bringing companies into the region to do their clinical evidence, how we can, looking at, it's really one of the only, if not the only, multi-institutional effort in the innovation space in the state that is really doing amazing work. And so, yes, back to your question, 100%. I think sustainability is part of every decision we make. And the other thing we're solely focused on is partnerships. How do we create partnerships with, there's large children's hospital networks, large value analysis networks. It's that, hey, look, if we're the intake evaluation tool for pediatric devices and pediatric software and the access, how can we help you with your mission and offset that? We've already created the operational infrastructure. We know how much it costs. We developed the process. How can we scale that and make it something that can be used anywhere?
Yeah. All right. So I want to ask a few generic questions here from you as well. But first off, this episode should be released sometime in the next few weeks. We're recording this on April 3rd. Cleveland Guardians opening day. Go Guardians. So there is the MPDC showcase, which is going to be in Cincinnati on Friday, May 15th. Yep. That'll be down there. Cory is speaking,
I'll be doing
think.
some opening remarks. Yeah.
Yeah, awesome. Yeah, and then so definitely if you're interested in the pediatric space, just check that out. It'll be a great event. There's actually some other events around there of that time as well that might be interested to people. We'll include links to that in the show notes. And then I think the other thing to kind of lay the groundwork for people who aren't familiar with Ohio is this is unique in the fact that Cleveland Clinic, Nationwide, and Nationwide and Ohio State are all in the same area in Columbus, Ohio, but that's an hour and a half south of Cleveland, which is where Cleveland Clinic is. Then you have the Nationwide Ohio State, and then you keep going down 71, another hour and a half, and you're at Cincinnati Children's. And that's a pretty interesting thing. If you were to think about a startup company, we talk about this a lot with ours, but then also on the podcast, which is, I think gone are the days where you need to be close to your investors.
Yep.
And it's more important to be close to your customers. And so if you think about being located in Columbus, Ohio, and having two big institutions like Ohio State and Nationwide together, being able to get to Cleveland in an hour and a half, Cincy in an hour and a half, that's a big deal. Not to mention when you expand beyond that, the drivability of that area to other hospitals. And so, yeah, if you are a pediatric device, what better place to test out your medical device than an area where you can get to 3, 4, 5 massive pediatric institutions and world renowned, right? And so, okay, let me ask the generic questions here, which is if you had to recommend one book to read for an aspiring innovator, entrepreneur, someone just interested in this space, what would you recommend to them?
I gotta use a self-help book. I gotta pick Atomic
Love it.
Habits. I gotta pick
Okay.
Atomic Habits. Yeah.
Yeah. I've seen
So-
that come up, but I haven't read that one yet.
Yeah, I think that it spans beyond, and the author's in Columbus, James.
Oh,
Clear,
really?
Columbus, yeah.
Nice.
It spans beyond, I think the innovation space, but it's really focused on 1% improvement every day. How do you focus on an identity? I think it's a great book for people that are looking to continue, moving forward and get better. So that's a book I recommend.
Yeah, I love the 1% improvement. Like this is how you look back in 2 years and go, shit, how'd we get here?
Yeah.
And it's like, that's how it's a 1% improvement every day. And then that compounds. Right. So I love that. Okay. If you had a piece of advice, so I've been asking this question a little bit. It's really for the our international audience of people who are looking to come to the US, but I've noticed that even the US companies it's valuable for. If you were giving advice to a European startup who's looking to bring their technology to the US market, what is one thing you would tell them that in terms of, hey, love it, we want to see it here, here's something you should know about the US healthcare system?
I would say that you have to get buy-in from a hospital somewhere with clinician buy-in. And so, one of the things that I think, 70 to 80% of the companies we deal with that come through need some type of clinical evidence. Having clinical evidence or hospital buy-in with a large institution and getting clinicians and doctors to support your technology will take you a long way. So getting that in the door is the hardest thing to do. And that's sort of what, you need a boots on the ground, but you also need, the access to get in. And so that is really, in my opinion, a huge barrier, but also your biggest advantage.
Yeah. And when you say that, you mean like getting a clinician like yourself, but also getting the hospital administrator to say, we would purchase this?
Exactly. Purchasing, value analysis, your clinical trials, like even clinical trials, I'll say, and getting your data is once you do a clinical trial or getting access, you've got now a clinician who supports your idea. You've got the hospital who can sort of see what's happening behind the scenes. And so getting back into the hospital system to do your studies, to meet with value analysis is so important to use as ammunition to go get more money to go sell elsewhere.
Awesome. And the last one is not a stock question I ask anyone else but you, but there's no way I'm not going to share this. Where would you prefer to buy a pair of jeans at, Buckle or Hollister?
Listen, I don't know if the audience knows this, but you're talking to two of the original retail salesmen from the ever popular retail stores, which are coming back now. The early 2000s are coming back. Buckle and Hollister, where I was a jeans specialist with whatever that means. It's like your Hermosa style, low rise, low cut, sandblast jeans. So
What is just hilarious is so I worked at Buckle when I was in high school, and Cory worked at Hollister, and funny enough, we worked at the same mall as well. But one of my other best friends, he was the best man at my wedding. He is a urologist oncologist at Cleveland Clinic, and he worked at Buckle with me. And so whatever Buckle did, and Hollister, it must be a thing where people get into med tech.
Talent acquisition from Buckle. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, you're going to get a Malcolm Gladwell book about how, the top 1% achievers all worked at Buckle. They trace it all back to that.
It's going to be who wrote Moneyball? Michael Lewis.
Yeah.
He's going to do a book about this pipeline of the South Park
what do they all
Mall.
have in common? Well, they sold really, really bedazzled jeans and Doc Martens shoes. And Affliction t-shirts.
And Affliction t-shirts. That was Buckle's thing. But you're right though. I was at we took our daughters to the mall to see a movie, and we were walking. They just put in a massive Buckle in the mall. Like it's somewhat coming back now, Yeah.
I walked through Abercrombie and Hollister, I think recently, and I was like, those are the exact same clothes that I wore in high school. Like, listen, I'm just saying, I don't know if we should be doing that, but they're everywhere now. So
yeah. This is how we should end a MedTech podcast.
Exactly.
So anyways, Cory, thanks for doing this. Hang on for 1 minute. We'll chat offline. We'll have all the links to everything in here. You got to go to the MPDC's website. We'll have Nationwide, Cory's LinkedIn. We'll have the showcase link in here as well. And we'll also put MPDC's YouTube channel link in here, because there's a lot of great content that we did last year and this year. And thanks for doing this again, Cory.
Yeah, anytime. Appreciate being here.
Hi, I'm Freddie Coffey, Director of Marketing at Jumpstart. The Project MedTech podcast is proudly sponsored by Jumpstart Inc. Jumpstart's Trailblazer Accelerator helps Ohio's most innovative early-stage health tech startups fast-track their growth with tailored advising from serial entrepreneurs, non-dilutive funding to fuel their journey, and unrivaled access to a network of experts, resources, and investment opportunities. Whether it's improving patient outcomes, advancing digital health, or reimagining care delivery, Jumpstart provides the high-impact services and critical resources to bring big ideas to life. Learn more at jumpstartinc.org/startups.
Thank you for listening. At our core, we at Project MedTech are networkers, educators, and consultants. We meet you where you are to bring value and to create impact. We care deeply about helping medtech companies succeed right from the start, through to exit, by providing consulting and fractional services, hosting impactful industry events, and of course, sharing incredible guest insights like the ones you heard today through our podcast. Please reach out at any time if we can be of assistance. Check out our website at www.projectmedtech.com or email us at info@projectmedtech.com.